This video is a log of the MacsAdventure's holiday Treasures of Western Sicily, which we took in May 2019. We are Jim&Dawn. The holiday was an enjoyable mixture of walking and sightseeing. We flew into Palermo and were transferred to Scapello for the start of our holiday. Our first day was spent walking along the ridge and returning along the coast path in the Zingaro Nature Reserve. On the second day, we first went for a walk up Monte Monaco and spent the afternoon on the beach in San Vito lo Capo before transferring to Trapani. On our first day in Trapani, we took the hydrofoil to Levanzo, where we visited the Neolithic Grotta del Genovese before walking around the island. On our second day in Trapani, we took the cable car to Erice and spent the rest of the day exploring that medieval city. We took the hydrofoil again on our final day in Trapani, this time to explore the island of Favignana and to visit its museum. On our final day, we travelled to Palermo, visiting the Segesta archaeological site on the way, and we finished our holiday with a walk through the historical centre of Palermo. We arrived in Palermo at midday. Our driver was waiting for us, and soon we were speeding along the road past Castellammare del Golfo to Scapello and our hotel, Pensione Trancina. We spent the rest of the day exploring Scapello. Don't leave your food unattended. And returned to the hotel for a superb fish supper. Next morning, we set off for the Zingaro Nature Reserve. About a kilometre along the road, we entered the reserve through this tunnel and took the path uphill past the information centre. We took this fork north to Piso del Corvo. The path climbed gently through beautiful carpets of wild flowers. And the views became more spectacular as we climbed. I love this tree. There were lizards everywhere. Another one. Grotta del Uso, where 10,000-year-old human remains have been found. Cala Torre Uso, the beach where we lunched. The north entrance. We took the coast path for our return. More lovely flowers. Our outbound route is up there. The final climb. Back to the southern entrance. And time for an ice cream and the final walk back to the pensione and another fish supper. Day 2, the Monte Monaco walk. The rain stopped just before we left Scapello. As we drove past the marble quarries, the sky began to lighten. Here's Monte Monaco. We're pleased not to have to put on our waterproofs at the start of the walk. Initially, the track was easy, but this changed on the steeper sections with mud slippery from the rain. The final section was drier, but was still slow as we were walking on loose rocks. We're there. More threatening clouds, but the views were spectacular. We prepared for rain, but it soon passed and the sun shone on our picnic. The track became easier as we descended southwards. That's where we're heading. We're down on the road now and our taxi meets us and takes us to San Vito lo Capo and a welcome beer. That is Monte Monaco, and here's the beach we used. There were hundreds of kites at the west end of the beach. They were fascinating. We walked around town before meeting our driver for the journey to Trapani. Our hotel. We're right at the top, behind the flower boxes. We loved the quaint baggage lift, but we had to carry our bags up the final spiral stairs to our room. Early next morning, we walked down to the ferry terminal and bought our tickets to Levanzo. Here's our ferry. In no time at all, we were in Levanzo, where we were met and driven to Grotta del Genovese. It was a steep path from the end of the road to the cave. Inside the cave, we were shown artwork scratched into the rocks, some dating back over 10,000 years.
The bison, the profile, the bison, the frontal. 12,000 BC. The head looking back.
More recent paintwork, perhaps only 7,000 or 8,000 years old, were figures of humans, mammals and fish. After our visit to the cave, we set off on foot for the north of the island. Capo Grosso Lighthouse. We found a good picnic spot near the lighthouse, overlooking a large gull colony. The cave again on our way back. Our last view of the lighthouse as we take the path south above the cave. The path reaches the coast and descends below the cliffs. Gulls don't like being disturbed. Steep drop to the sea. As we near the port, the path turns into a road. Cacti above us and beside us. The harbour, and our hydrofoil back to Trapani to end a good day's outing. Next morning, we walked along the waterfront and through the town to the cable car terminal, from where we rode up to the medieval town of Erice. In Erice, we were immediately struck by the narrow streets with their elaborate cobbles. Churches seemed to be everywhere. The views from the city walls were spectacular. After our initial exploration, we bought tickets for the Erice Art Foundation sites. We began at the Castle of Venus. This Norman castle is built on the site of a Roman temple to Venus and has recycled some of its stone. Temple ruins lie within its grounds. Next was the Pepoli Tower, built by Count Pepoli in 1870. From there, we walked to the Spanish Quarter, calling in at this church on the way. The Spanish Quarter is a 17th century fort that now houses an arts and crafts museum. With its tapestry and ceramics. The Municipal Museum, with its Roman and Greek pottery, and its collection of sacred artwork. Our next call was at the Museum Erice in miniature. Our final call was the cathedral. I loved its sumptuous ceiling. We returned to the cable car and travelled back down to Trapani. Walked along the waterfront and stopped in the road of our hotel for cocktails before dining in the evening. On our final day in Trapani, we again took the hydrofoil ferry, this time to the island of Favignana. We arrived an hour before the museum opened, so we took a walk along the coast to the east of the port. The museum is at the antique tuna cannery, Stabilimento Florio, and is dedicated to fishing. Roman remains, tuna cooking vessels, tuna fishing boats, Castello Santa Caterina is our next destination. First steps, and then a steep incline wind up to it. We're up. Time for a drink. The castle is unsafe, so we stayed outside and enjoyed the views to the east. Back down again. And then up the path to the col. As we reach the col, we leave the port behind, can see our destination, the Punta Sottile lighthouse. After an awkward, steep, slippery section, the path flattens and joins the road. Looking back, the castle and the col. We're soon at the lighthouse, where we wait by the water's edge for our taxi to take us back to the port and to the hydrofoil to our hotel in Trapani. It's our final day and we're heading for Palermo. On the way, we stop off at Segesta. First thing we see is this Doric temple outside the city. It dates from the 5th century BC and was never completed. In the valley below the city are remains of the valley gate in the outer city wall. We climb up to the hilltop city. The temple, Roman era building remains. The 15th century church, the Roman amphitheatre. Above it are remains of the 13th century Norman castle, with its commanding views over the countryside. The Agora, with remains of a huge plastered portico overlooking the terrace. These date from the 2nd century BC. Here's an artist's impression and a plan. Time to leave, and an hour later we're at our hotel in Palermo. A few minutes later we were walking past San Domenico and heading into La Vicaria. By the coast, La Calla, east along Via Alloro, heading towards the Norman palace in the old town. Inside the palace, the most breathtaking room was the Cappello Palatina. The artwork on the floors, and the walls, and the ceiling was stunning. The assembly hall, used by the Sicilian Parliament, and the staterooms. The palace gardens. Next, the cathedral. And then we find a restaurant for our final supper. It's morning and we're heading for the airport and are entertained as we wait for our flight home.